Thank you, everyone. Awesome. So yeah, as Tony mentioned, my name's Cody. I'm a product manager out of the US office, and this is my second year at Computex doing some of these media events, and I can't tell you how thrilled I am to talk about this specific update to ActiveProtect Manager. So today's whole session is going to be about what's in store for ActiveProtect in the future, and we're going to take a brief moment at the very beginning to talk about what successes it's had since it was launched about 2 years ago. So overall, ActiveProtect has been a well-received solution. We've had multiple deployments all over the United States and the world as well that place the unit in the hands of IT administrators, hospitals, telecommunication firms, healthcare, manufacturing, etc. We constantly reach out to the users of these deployed systems to gather feedback, to understand what features they need. And whenever we reached out, we received some really good feedback, including that the system itself is highly stable, easy to use, and most of all, very cost-effective on top of that. Today, ActiveProtect Manager has become an essential tool in the backup appliance industry, backing up leading industry partners' solutions in virtual machines, including Microsoft 365 accounts, as well as mission-critical production data on top of that. Today, across the entire Synology backup portfolio, we are actually backing up over 30 million entities worldwide, showing our true commitment to data protection and resiliency for organizations also worldwide. And now, Synology is being recognized the world over as a strong performer in the backup market, with nearly 100% of our users recommending ActiveProtect to their peers. And the big reason for this is ActiveProtect is the only solution that delivers every critical enterprise backup capability without feature gating the features and all of that stuff behind licensing. So whenever we're going to talk about all the features today, once you have your ActiveProtect appliance, you have all the features that we're talking about. You aren't going to be nickeled and dimed. You're not going to have this snowball effect in terms of your subscriptions. So whenever we're talking about ActiveProtect deployments today, we're seeing kind of a range of trends as we're actually installing these systems across the planet. So first off, we're seeing a large trend of users wanting to move away from traditional backup solutions that are a little bit more disaggregated. And what I mean by disaggregated is not spread out, but rather backup systems that utilize a specific piece of software, a separate piece of compute from a different vendor, and then storage from yet another vendor on top of that. Those kinds of systems, the backup software itself doesn't actually have that much visibility into what the other hardware health is and what the status of those platforms are. Second, we have a very easy entry point into the platform overall. We have a wide range of hardware we're going to talk about a little bit later that allows you to install initially, and you can progressively grow the system. And then whenever you need to move to a new, larger, more powerful system, you don't have to re-architect your entire backup infrastructure. It's entirely designed to grow with the organization. And finally, this system is designed with distributed deployment protection at top of mind. So what we're talking about there is it's designed for organizations that are enterprises that have multiple sites, remote offices, or MSPs, and supporting those MSPs' workflows for their clients on top of that. A couple other trends I'd like to highlight before we dive into some of these features. Now, I've been in IT for going on 12 years now, and I'm seeing an unprecedented fracturing of the virtualization market that I haven't seen in my entire career regarding VMware and its pricing changes. Now, more than ever, organizations are looking at changing the mixture of their IT stack. They're hopping to different hypervisors, trying it out, either completely switching platforms or operating now multiple instead of just the one, because VMware used to set the bar and now people are reevaluating. On top of that, we're seeing a mutation of ransomware and things like that. Whenever we look at nefarious actors, bad actors trying to access your data, they're using AI tools to attack organizations to prod and poke the system security so that they can get in a little bit more efficiently. So we're going to talk about how ActiveProtect 2.0 helps to solve these. And so it is my pleasure to introduce this platform today, a system built to increase your organization's cyber readiness and build your solution across an edge to cloud infrastructure. Now, ActiveProtect Manager, whenever we're trying to build these resiliency features into this platform, we need to have something that can protect everything and restore anywhere, because we have highly dynamic environments with multiple platforms. Next, we also need AI-driven proactive resiliency. What we mean there is we need AI and machine learning techniques on your side working for your backups and your protection rather than just having the bad guys using the AI to attack you. So you need your own tools to defend yourself with. Next, of course, is best-in-class operational efficiency. That is, of course, a requirement in all IT solutions today. You cannot just run an inefficient system. You need a cost-effective system that just works. So we're going to talk about a couple different things. Whenever we're talking about ActiveProtect Manager, you need to have comprehensive platform support because you're operating such a dynamic environment. You have, again, multiple platforms, maybe Windows, Mac devices, as well as multiple hypervisors, infrastructure as a service on top of that. So you need to back all those up, and then you need to be able to flexibly restore them across multiple different destinations on top of that. So whenever we're looking at the IT industry today, many different organizations are actually seeing a little bit of a habit around cloud repatriation. Whenever we're talking about cloud usage, originally when the cloud came out, everyone was really excited about it. It's very convenient, it's agile, easy to grow, and it's kind of someone else's problem most of the time. However, these cloud workloads definitely do increase some risk whenever you're trying to do restore, and also your costs can indeed balloon a little bit more than you may have expected whenever you originally deployed. So on top of that, there is also a shared responsibility model in these infrastructure as a service platforms and in the Google Workspace platforms, software as a service platforms, et cetera, that basically says those organizations take care of the host, you need to take care of your data. So you need a platform that is either, one, able to protect you if you're moving out of those platforms, and you need a backup anyway because of that shared responsibility model. So that's why, overall, when we take a look at ActiveProtect 2.0, we now support all 5 of these platforms inside of the ActiveProtect lineup. So we now support Azure VMs, AWS EC2 VMs, Google Workspace alongside Microsoft 365 backups, as well as the addition of native support for Nutanix and Proxmox on top of that. So now users are empowered to move between these platforms to find that mixture that works best for them and remain protected while they are exploring those different options. Another great feature that I'd like to highlight here is ActiveProtect has an extensive library of backup and tiering destinations that you can utilize offsite. Ever since ActiveProtect Manager 1.0 a couple years ago, it has long supported backing up and tiering data and all that to ActiveProtect appliances, Synology NAS like an HD 6500, Synology C2, S3, Wasabi, and other S3 compatible destinations on top of that. However, new to this version, ActiveProtect 2.0 is the addition of Azure Blob Storage as a backup copy destination and as a tiering destination on top of that. We are going to come back to this point on Azure Blob Storage whenever we discuss some additional new features in just a couple moments here. So one of the main great features inside of a Synology backup solution, ever since the first ones we did, is the ability to do cross-platform restores. We have long been able to do VMware to Hyper-V restores and back again, no problem. Regardless of where the VM came from, we could always move between those. With the addition of these new platforms being supported inside of ActiveProtect Manager, we'll carry this feature through to ActiveProtect Manager 2.0. So you can cross-platform restore across VMware to Nutanix, Nutanix to Proxmox, Proxmox to VMware, et cetera. Whatever you need to do those cross-platform restores, this system is capable of supporting overall. So whenever we take a look, circling back to the Azure Blob point I made previously, let's say you're an organization that is fully bought into the Microsoft environment. Let's say you're using the infrastructure as a service, you're using Azure VMs, and you have blob storage going, and you have ActiveProtect appliance due to the shared responsibility model. So in this case, we're actually backing up some VMs to our on-site location, and then copying them up to Azure Blob Storage. That's where the environment stands right now. Let's say you actually need to do a VM restore. ActiveProtect Manager will allow you to do a direct cloud-to-cloud restore rather than having to pull it back across the wider network from your on-premises location. So you can actually use the data that's already in the blob storage to perform that restore. So that means you don't have data transiting the wider network. That can save cost, and it's going to be that much more performant just sending that data direct to cloud. So our next step here is we're going to take a look at a demo in just a moment. We're going to showcase all the things we just described, including an instant restore from VMware into Proxmox with a native integration. And then we're going to take a look at restoring cloud to cloud blob storage directly into Azure to kind of help reduce that traffic. I'd also like to introduce my colleague Tony, who's going to be taking the reins on these demos. And we're going to go ahead and let him take over now. And I'm going to hop off the stage so that we can all take a look. So here you can see that we are inside of our ActiveProtect Manager environment. And what we're going to do first is take a look at our ESXi environment and see what VMs we have running in here. So we have 40 gigabyte VM, 30 gigabyte VM, and those are the ones that are being protected by ActiveProtect Manager. So let's go ahead and check that out over there. If we go up to machines, virtual machines, you'll notice we have all of those different VMs listed. And we can begin interacting with them and restoring them if you needed to. So to do that, you would actually go over to the right-hand side and click those three dots, and you would restore to a virtual machine. You choose your versions that you need, and then you can choose to restore to the original location or to a new location. Remember, we're doing a migration from a VMware VM into a Proxmox environment. So we're going to go to the new location in this case. Now we're going to choose what hypervisor host we want to send this to. We have several different listed. We're going to Proxmox right now, so we're going to go straight there. Now we can choose to do an instant restore or a full restore. For disaster recovery service purposes, the instant restore is the better solution because you can get up and running that much quicker. For other situations where you need to do the full restore, that is an option on top of that. And then we're going to go ahead and name our VM. We're going to name it something simple like DR, disaster recovery, and move on. This is a flat network, so we have just one subnet. We'll just go ahead and select that. And we can review this different things that are going to occur whenever we actually do the restore. Once we hit done, it's going to begin that restore process into our Proxmox environment. Now we're going to go ahead and click the View button up here so we can see what the status is, and you can see it's around 95%. It can take a little bit of time for it to verify that the instant restore is good, but keep in mind we're going VMware to Proxmox. We could have gone to Nutanix, we could have gone to Hyper-V, or wherever else. So now you can see it's ready to migrate. So let's go ahead and check out the Proxmox environment so we can see what the status looks like over here. So if we drop into this node, you can see VM 102. Disaster recovery is now available, and we could boot that up and get going right at that very moment. And that was a full native integration with Proxmox. Next, we're going to take a look at how we can do that shortcut method that we previously described. So you can see we have this East Asia VM right at the very bottom there, and it is going to our Azure Blob Storage system up in Azure. So we can take a shortcut method to do a restore if we ever had to. Similarly to the Proxmox restore, we're going to go to the Restore to Virtual Machine tab here. Choose our versions once again. And this time, we're not changing hypervisors. We're still sending the VM back into Azure. So we're going to restore to original location. And we can choose where we want to restore from. And it's important to pause here in this dropdown. You'll notice we can either choose to restore from our HQ server or on-premises device, which would send data back over your wider network. However, we want to take the shortcut method, and you'll see there's a second option here where you can send it from a different data location, that Azure Blob Storage. When we select that one, that will be the way we do the shortcut method. Now, once we hit next, it'll begin actually doing that restore. Notice this is a full restore in this case, so it'll take a little bit of time, and we're going to review some of our other settings. Great. So now that restoration has indeed kicked off, we can see its status under this View button here, and you can see the restore is now going Azure Blob back into the Azure Resource Group. Let's go ahead and check out the network monitor for this backup system just to prove there's no data moving across our wider network right now. So we're going to log into the mini DSM side of ActiveProtect and go to the resource monitor. When we take a look at the network tab here, you'll see a brief little peek just from like loading the page, very small packet, but now there's essentially no activity across the network on the system. Remember, we had 30, 40 gigabyte VMs in that case, so we would expect more data to be moving if we were actually sending data. But as you can see, we're not. We're fully utilizing that shortcut method. So let's talk a little bit about the AI industry as a whole. I'm sure many of us in here have heard about this. If you're plugged in especially. Anthropic's Claude released, or rather didn't release, a recent model called Claude Mythos, and it caused quite a bit of a stir because this model was better than any model before it because it was very adept at finding 0 days that had previously gone unnoticed for years and years, despite humans looking over it anyway. So this is quite actually a threatening development because essentially this means models are becoming more exotic and even more capable than some humans in certain scenarios. So what this means for backups is we have our nefarious actors or bad actors also have models that they probably have that are very similar to this, some that we don't even know about just yet that we haven't seen in the wild. So the implications for your backup system is you need a backup system that is adaptable and able to handle these rising threats in the world today. So let's talk a little bit about the backup industry. I believe for 20 years, the 3-2-1 backup method was the primary strategy for organizations the world over. Again, that's 3 different copies, 2 different media, at least 1 different copy offsite. And if you had that and you actually tested your backups and drilled them for disaster recovery, then you were mostly protected in the industry. However, right around that point, we had ransomware evolving, and they weren't just going after your data anymore. They were going after your backups, they were going after your snapshots, and also wiping those or encrypting those on top of that. So that's where we are today now. We have a system called ActiveProtect Manager that builds cyber resiliency to help you survive those kinds of attacks through usage of things like immutability and offline copies on top of that. Now, moving beyond, we need to rise above just having these simple items here, and we need to get AI back on our side. We need our own defense mechanisms that are equally adaptive to those kind of rising threats. So we need proactive threat mitigation to help search and then deal with those threats as they come in. As a quick reminder, ActiveProtect Manager has employed a 32110 backup method since version 1.0. And that means we have 3 different copies, 2 different medium, 1 copy offsite, and you can do an air gap copy or immutable copy, at least one of those, and 0 errors. And that 0 errors is not to just be glossed over. That's very important for the operators of the backup system. If we have a bunch of erroneous errors, it can create an alert fatigue so they don't react to the real problems. So having 0 errors is a critical piece of this puzzle here. So let's talk a little bit more about how ActiveProtect Manager incorporates AI and machine learning anomaly detection as well as malware-free restoration for your usages and for your protection against nefarious actors and bad actors out there. So on the first step of the chain, we're going to talk about AI and machine learning anomaly detection, and it's a system that discovers irregularity and provides richer information to IT admins so they can help mitigate threats. It's important to note that this anomaly detection occurs while backups are actually being collected. So the anomaly detection occurs during backup, and the engine will actually analyze what's going on whenever you're collecting that backup and compare it to previous history of your backups specifically. So it's kind of more behavior oriented. So let's talk a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of this. Essentially, this model will take your previous 30 backup versions and train its own custom model on your behavior, how your users interact with their computers, and how that actually trickles down into your backup system as well. And this platform will use key metrics and metadata to analyze your user's behavior, and then, of course, that'll help it identify the irregularities and the anomalies whenever you go to collect additional backups past that. So here are the different types of the AI and machine learning anomaly detection metrics that it can use to analyze the environment. So you have it analyzing anomalous change rates, anomalous file updates, like a mass encryption event, for example, mass deletions, like someone was wiping a file, for example, and also file entropy on top of that. Now, AI and machine learning anomaly detection is a system that will allow you to it's a system that continuously trains itself over time. It's not just a one-time training of this model based on your first 30 versions. It's continuously working on improving itself over time. And users can actually quarantine data to isolate it from other environments so it protects your good data. And likewise, your users can also steer the model if there's any false positives. So if you take a look on the right-hand side, you'll see that this specific anomaly is an unusually large data change, and you can mark it as this version as clean if you know this is something that was supposed to happen. So for example, let's say you had a file server filling up, and you went and you wiped a bunch of data. It was just normal, just cleansing of data. It's aged out data, 15 years old, or what have you. That would be a case where you might want to come in here and mark this version as clean, and that would be a scenario where you'd want to steer the model and have it ignore that specific situation. Now, speaking of overall quarantine and those kinds of features. Again, users can quarantine this data to help protect your good versions overall. As we heard in the first session, DSM's getting role-based access control, and there is role-based access control in ActiveProtect Manager 2.0 as well. So what that means is general self-service users will only be able to have access to their own personal backups, but they can be prohibited from seeing the backups that are bad. They won't be able to restore it, they won't be able to explore it, they won't be able to download the data on top of that. So admins would be the ones that are actually able to restore and download the impacted data for investigation, and then they can deem it cleansed, or they could trash it if it's not one that they deem okay. So that was all about the AI and machine learning anomaly detection. That is something that occurs whenever you go and collect your backups, or actually you're actually bringing in your backups at that part of the chain. But we're going to talk about the next side of the chain here, and that is recovery. And that's where malware-free restoration options come into play. The ActiveProtect Manager devices will integrate with antivirus software on third-party servers and will actually use that server to help scan your backup versions before you go and do a restore. So it's going to make sure there's no malicious entities residing inside of those backups before you re-inject it into your production environment. And it's a very critical thing for this component to be in place, and we'll talk about that in just a second. So the Synology ActiveProtect appliances will be able to integrate with Windows and Linux servers that are operating things like Bitdefender, ESET, and Windows Defender. And the backup server will send the backup versions will be scanned by these servers, and then that server will send the results back to the ActiveProtect server to be analyzed by the admin. That admin will get notifications, email alerts, all that stuff, and then they could react accordingly. It's really important that a system like this is capable of scanning the backups before you re-inject them into your production environment, because most of the time, if you had a ransomware event, you've spent hours cleaning up your environment overall. You've spent maybe at least a couple hours just cleaning the environment, servers, and things like that. And it would be quite unfortunate if all that work went to waste and you re-injected bad data and everything got infected again. So taking it a step further, you can also use Synology's ActiveProtect appliance's air gap feature to fully offline that device, to fully isolate it from the production environment and areas that could get infected. So that would be your last line of defense if you did have an attack in your environment overall. It's important to note, whenever we're taking a look at a platform like this, we do have some malware scanning occurring here, but this is not something that replaces the antivirus and all that stuff that you have on your endpoints. It's used alongside that. Whenever we're talking about the overall antivirus field and security field, it's more about layers rather than one perfect solution to do it all. So this is another layer to double check and double confirm your versions are good when you go to do that restore. So another great feature inside of the malware detection and all that whenever you're actually going to do the restore is it will take the fingerprint of its results on that bad version and reanalyze all your versions going back until it finds a good one. And that means it'll recommend a clean version that can be restored back into your production environment. And it gives you that vulnerability-free version without just erroring out. It gives you the proper solution and gets you going as quickly as you can. So let's go ahead and take a look at the next demo here. This is a 32110 cyber resiliency demo here. And we're going to be building some backup plans and things like that. It's important to note that we're going to claim that this can happen in about 3 to 5 minutes. And Tony here is one of the greatest ActiveProtect users in the entire planet here. So whenever we're talking about this, we're not actually looking at speed running, configuring your backup plans. We're actually just saying that this system is very simple to configure. You're able to configure these advanced detection capabilities with just a couple simple checkboxes. So what we're going to do next is we're going to hand it back over to Tony. I'll step off the stage here. Okay, and you can see we're back inside of our ActiveProtect Manager environment, and we're going to be building an overall system that has air gap features and all that. So we need somewhere else to send this data in the first place. So we're going to join a copy server to this environment, and it's a brand new system. So this is kind of an out-of-the-box experience if you were to do this yourself. When we hit this join button, it's going to start that process of joining this backup server to the main production site. When we hit next, it'll prompt for a couple different items that you'll need to fill out, and these can be easily retrieved from your main HQ backup management server. All we would need to do is go to that specific backup server, and we can click or Backup Servers tab and go to Add. On the next screen here, it has all the details you need to get this server all paired back to ActiveProtect Manager. So it's a simple copy-paste of 2 items, and you'll be able to join the system to the main brain on your entire cluster. Awesome. And now we continue to move on here, and the copy server is ready to go and ready to join the ActiveProtect Manager site here. So as you can see, it's loading, and it will begin redirecting you back to your ActiveProtect Manager main management node. So ActiveProtect Manager is meant to be managed from your main device, and you're not going to be individually jumping into each node on a site. So that's why it's redirecting you back. You won't be joining or configuring that individual node manually further. So now you can see it's syncing a couple different items here. It's basically doing some health checks and making sure everything's in line on the main management server. So this will be our backup copy destination, and we want to be able to offline it as well. So we're going to configure the air gap feature. It's quite simple here. We can go to access mode, click hardened mode, set your schedule as you need, and then click save. And once that's done, the system is hardened and will offline itself based on the settings that you set in the menu overall. Finally, what we're going to do next is move over to the protection plan side of things and begin creating our immutable protection plan that we've been describing. So when we go to create plan for physical and virtual machines, right at the very beginning, this is something I enjoy with ActiveProtect, you cannot mess up immutable protection. You have a fork in the road right at the beginning when you create your plan. Do you want immutable protection or do you not? And whenever you select immutable protection plan, that means at every step of the chain, from your first backup to your backup to a second location to tiering it to the cloud, will all respect that immutable flag that you set right here. Next, we're going to name this overall backup plan, and this is just a 32110 backup plan, and we will name it accordingly. Next, you can choose your backup versions and also change how your backups run, like the cadence of the backups being collected, for example. We're going to leave these default since that's typically a good place to start. On the next screen, you're going to be able to enable some advanced features like application-aware backups, database processing if you have them. And of course, the last screen here is the ability to enable a bunch of different quality of life things, particularly enabling backup verification. It's a way for the system to take a low resolution of your VM or your physical server. It's going to be booted on the internal hypervisor of the ActiveProtect appliance, and it'll actually record that video, send it to you, and verify that that version's good and that you can rely on it whenever you actually need to do the restore. On this next screen, this is going to be where we actually incorporate that other device we just added. So we're going to enable our backup copy and choose that ActiveProtect appliance that we just selected or just added in. And that means that all the backup versions in the backup copy server will periodically offline themselves based off of that air gap feature that we created. Next, we can go ahead and review all the different settings. Keep in mind, these aren't set in stone. You can change them later. So if you needed to change your backup cadence, change your retention, that's doable. And once we hit create plan, that plan will be ready to go to begin protecting some of your workloads in your critical infrastructure. So what we're going to do is go back to some of those virtual machines we were interacting with previously. And we're going to select a couple of them, and we can go and change their plan using the More Options field here. We can select our 32110 option here, and you'll notice that it did respect that immutable protection flag there. So that means that every step of the chain will be protected with that technology, and we also have air gap features. Awesome. Now you can see that that workload is now fully protected, of course. Next, we're going to show you the other features that we were just talking about, AI and machine learning, anomaly detection, and malware scanning as well. So under general here, it's quite simple to enable the anomaly detection model. You just do one checkbox, you hit save, and that is it. From then on, the system will begin building this model and training itself on your user's behavior, and will begin doing all the features we described, including helping you detect anomalies as you're collecting the backups. Now, whenever you go over to the scanner demo here, we can go ahead and take a look at a couple different virtual machines that have been already built into an environment, and we have some results from them. So we're going to show you what these results actually look like whenever things are actually detected. So if we go to versions here, you'll notice that we have a successful backup version, but anomaly was detected. It was an unusually large data change, and if it's a false positive, you can indeed mark it. So again, if you knew that was happening and you were cleaning up your servers, for example, then maybe you would select that that version is clean. If you weren't doing that, it's time to look at that system and see what happened. Next, we're going to take a look at how we can actually enable the malware scan feature when we go to do the restore overall. So what we're going to do is choose an instant restore option here, just like we did previously. Choose our versions, and we're going to breeze through some of these menus simply because we've seen a couple of them so far, and this is just one checkbox at the very end. But we're going to name this DR test and move on with the default settings. Again, we have a flat network. We're going to choose that virtual disk. And in step 5, you can do one checkbox to enable the malware scan, and it will start sending the data it needs to the malware servers, the antivirus servers who will detect the malware, and then it will send back its results to the system overall. So once we hit next and done, it'll start that instant restore, but scan the version first before it places it into the ultimate destination there. So we go to view here, you can see it is in the status of scanning. It's not doing the restore until the scanning is done and everything has passed. So what we're going to do next is take a look at the history of this device. We've had some trouble with it. And you'll notice that we have had some bad malware scans happen whenever we were doing the restore. And this is an example of what it would look like if you did get malware detected in one of those versions. It's showing you what virus you have, what was going on, and you can use those definitions to do some further research and then perform some further mitigations after that. So we're coming to the end here a little bit. So we're going to talk about some additional features in best-in-class operational efficiency that ActiveProtect really provides the customers. You're able to have an efficient solution, and all your features are already included in the platform. We're going to start off first with the end-to-end reduction engine that is built into ActiveProtect Manager, and it really helps build a system that is highly efficient in terms of the storage it's actually utilizing. First, I'd like to describe how ActiveProtect actually builds its backup images, because I feel like it's fairly unique in the approach that it takes. So all Synology backup platforms will do a full backup first and then do incremental changes from then onward. However, this is not a traditional incremental backup system. It actually takes those incremental backups and everything you had before and builds standalone images that can be utilized. So it gives you the functional equivalent for backups, same as like a synthetic full backup. So it's functionally equivalent to that kind of backup topology. Now, when we look at this, that means that overall, there's not really a real distinction between this type of incremental backups and those synthetic fulls. And what's great about this is there's not the same amount of resource usage that usually goes into the synthetic full creation, because that's usually a heavy process in those kinds of scenarios. So this is definitely a step beyond what you would consider a traditional incremental backup system. It goes beyond that. It's more akin to like a synthetic full backup, but without that resource usage. So moving on to the overall data reduction engine that's capable in this platform, it has global source-side cross-site deduplication capabilities. So as your data is moving from the source side on your endpoints, for example, on your infrastructure as a service, there's source-side deduplication occurring there. And then that's your first copy of your backups. And then when you're sending your second copy across, there's again yet more deduplication. What's awesome about this platform is the deduplication pool is much larger than a traditional system. You're not just deduplicating data right here, you're deduplicating your data across your site. So you get much more savings as you grow an environment that has similar network devices built into it. Let's say you had an office and you had the same repeatable structure, a Windows server, 10 machines, etc. As you add those sites over and over again, you would probably see an increase in your overall deduplication ratios because it takes your entire cluster and your entire site into account. Now, it's important to note, when we were talking about this deduplication, it's not server-side deduplication. We're talking about source-side deduplication. So this helps you reduce your backup footprint, and because the deduplication is occurring at an earlier stage, it also helps you to save network bandwidth. So in the realm of infrastructure as a service, having source-side deduplication means you have less egress going out of your cloud platforms. So you're saving costs there. It's a little bit more efficient. And so this, alongside the incremental backup strategy that we just described, means you're saving as much storage space as you possibly can and using the system most efficiently. So I would like to discuss a client in Taiwan that is utilizing this platform with great success. InfoTimes here is using this platform because they had a rapid growth in terms of the amount of video assets that they had to retain. Their policies internally means they got to take in this media assets and keep them for quite some time. So they also need to back that data up in case something came in and tried to delete that data overall. So whenever InfoTimes moved to ActiveProtect Manager, we saw that they were able to save around 65% in their deployment costs because ActiveProtect completely eradicated their subscription fees in their entire backup structure. And with the use of source-side, cross-site deduplication, they also saved around 75% of their overall storage space in their backup infrastructure on top of that. So quite successful there. Another feature I'd like to highlight is the data lifecycle capabilities inside of ActiveProtect Manager. So we have two different ones that we'd like to highlight here, including auto backup capabilities and auto retire features on top of that. Auto backup is quite important, especially if you're moving between hypervisors and other platforms. So auto backup is actually capable of having you pre-assign a backup plan to a hypervisor, a resource group, a tag, etc. So it's such that if you add a VM to that hypervisor, node, resource group, tag, it'll automatically protect those VMs whenever they land on that system. So let's say you're in VMware and you're ready to move to Nutanix, and you're going to move the VMs with Nutanix move, for example. So what you can do is set an auto backup policy such that when you actually perform that move, it'll automatically back up those now new Nutanix VMs. So once those VMs land on Nutanix, it'll automatically begin backing those up. And you're not duplicating the storage of that initial backup. It will be deduplicated, actually, because you still have the other backup chain that you'll still retain from the VMware side of things. Now, in terms of auto retire, this is also an important feature. So ActiveProtect will reach out to the hypervisor and query for a specific VM whenever it's doing a backup. And if it's not there, it'll error because it's actually looking for something to back up and it can't find it. And it's important to have this auto retire feature because sometimes we retire VMs, we remove VMs because we no longer need them. Maybe it was a legacy machine we finally moved off of and we can reclaim some of those resources. With auto retire, we will remove it from the umbrella of that backup plan so that ActiveProtect won't reach out and attempt to grab that VM when it doesn't exist. So whenever you intentionally remove these VMs like this, auto retire helps you reduce the amount of errors that are ultimately generated whenever you perform those operations. And again, the reason that this is here is to reduce alert fatigue on your admins so that they can respond to malware scans, anomaly detection, and other things that are much more important than an erroneous error like that. Overall, ActiveProtect has helped organizations save quite a bit of money in terms of capital expenditure. When we're talking about Toyota, one of the largest car manufacturers in the world, they saw around a 75% data reduction in their entire backup infrastructure due to subscription savings, due to deduplication savings on top of that. And with our users in the healthcare and semiconductor industry, they're also seeing extensive amounts of capital expenditure optimizations for their organizations. So I'd like to review some of the things we talked about here today. We had quite a long discussion on all the different things that ActiveProtect can protect. It can protect pretty much everything and restore pretty much everywhere with that cross-platform restoration capability. So we have new platform support with AWS EC2, Azure VM, Nutanix Acropolis, Proxmox, and Google Workspace. We also have new tiering destinations and backup copy destinations in the Azure Blob destination that we now support, as well as cross-platform recovery, and we have that shortcut method that you can use. In the example we provided, we restored from Azure Blob back into that Azure resource group. That is also true for AWS environments. On top of that, we can restore from S3 to AWS EC2 in a shortcut as well. In terms of AI-driven proactive resiliency, there's anomaly detection when you're collecting your backups and malware detection when you're going to restore them in that last mile after you've mitigated that ransomware issue in your network. Next, we have the best-in-class operational efficiency. There's the included end-to-end data reduction engine alongside the incremental backup strategy that help you use the system most efficiently. And there's also auto protection, auto retire features that all come together to help you save money overall for your organization. We spent quite a bit of time talking about the overall software inside of ActiveProtect Manager, but there's also a wide range of infrastructure options that Synology provides to meet a various range of needs for a wide range of organizations. So we have a healthy lineup of NAS devices in the desktop form factor and the rack mount form factor for the ActiveProtect appliances. So we have the DP320 and the 340. These are excellent systems to start out with, and you can grow your organization with them. So you can progressively increase the amount of desktop units you have or move into the larger systems if you need to due to capacity reasons or performance reasons on top of that. Whenever we're looking at the DP320 and 340, you're able to manage up to 300,000 workloads with even the smaller systems. A couple reasons why you might want to move up to the larger platform. There's more capacity and there's more performance to do instant restores and disaster recovery operations locally on the platform. It's important to note that you can mix and match these systems as well. And they're perfectly curated to specific deployments. They are one single SKU that have all the hard drives, the SSD cache, the networking, et cetera, you would need to have a successful deployment. And they're already specified to be able to handle protection for a specific amount of data. However, I'd like to highlight that many businesses and enterprises out there may have a large investment in their IT infrastructure. They may have some extra hypervisor capabilities that are going unutilized, or they might have some server hardware that has some extra capacity on it. So recognizing this, I have just one more thing to share with all of you today. And that is that after ActiveProtect Manager 2.0, Synology will begin development of the virtual ActiveProtect appliance to help organizations that do have that investment in place and want to utilize this platform on the hardware that they already have. So this system is going to be something that's fully Synology platform. It's already hardened out of the box. There's automated patching, and it's a ready-to-deploy system. I'm very excited for this because it's going to widen the audience for ActiveProtect Manager and allow us to have this kind of protection in all kinds of extra businesses on top of that. So that about wraps up the ActiveProtect Manager 2.0 portion of today's session. Once again, I'm Cody. Thank you so much for tuning in and learning how ActiveProtect can back up anything and restore pretty much anywhere. Thank you so much, and please have a good rest of your Computex.